everybody, I am Sherry Bevan. Welcome to Confident Conversations, the podcast for ambitious women about confidently balancing work and life. If this is your first time listening, thank you for joining me. The Confident Conversations podcast is produced every week for your enjoyment, and you can find the show notes at theconfidentmother.co.uk. So now let's get into the show. Today I'm talking to Susan Heaton Wright from Executive Voice. Susan helps people get heard in meetings, at presentations and in public speaking. I interviewed Susan a couple of years ago, and there's a whole chapter in my book about how to project confidence through your voice and presence. I'm really looking forward to revisiting this topic, and today specifically to talk about how to confidently speak up in meetings. So Susan, welcome to the show. Let's just dive straight in.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me back. It's always lovely to talk to you, Sherry.
Oh, thank you, Susan. So, speaking up at meetings, what, in your experience, what are the common worries or fears that women have about speaking up at meetings?
Do you know, I think that it's a common fear that everybody has, not just women. This happens with men as well. The thing that you might not get heard, that people might laugh at what you're contributing, that people would just disregard what you say, or that they ignore you.
Yes, and nobody wants to feel like, particularly if you're worried about speaking up, or it's a topic perhaps is a bit controversial, or you've got an idea that's a kind of a bit out there.
Yes.
You really don't want to be laughed at, or worse, ignored. For some people, maybe being laughed at is worse. I suppose that depends on your personality, but we don't want to be ignored, do we?
Oh, absolutely not. And if you're wanting to be part of the team and you constantly feel that you're being overlooked or that your contribution isn't valued, then it's going to do you no good at all with your confidence.
Yes, and I guess the thing is, if you do feel you've had that knockback in, that somebody's ignored you once, that's going to be playing on your mind the next time you feel like you ought to speak up, or you want to speak up. And so I suppose it becomes a bit of a vicious cycle.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure you've had, well, maybe you haven't had situations, but I've certainly had situations in the past when I felt I've contributed and then people talk over me, and then what I've said a few minutes later comes up, a bright idea by somebody else, and you think, goodness me, I've said that. And I'm not getting the brownie points for it.
That's a story that I hear from the women that I work with all the time. I made this great suggestion and it fell on deaf ears. And then 2 hours later, or 2 weeks later, or 10 minutes later sometimes, that same idea, John came up with that idea and suddenly everybody loved it. So that comes up all the time. So what can we do to kind of fix that? How do we make sure that people know that we had that idea first, or that it started off as our idea?
Yes, I think that this is a really, really interesting question. And I think that you need to go back and think about how you said that comment. Was it aside to somebody else? Was it sort of very quietly said, perhaps in a non-assertive way? Was it a whiny way? Were you getting frustrated? Oh, I think, and which can put people off. But if you have said it in an assertive way, it was disregarded, perhaps there was a lot of conversation going on, and then Jack says it again and gets the brownie points or Cub Scout points for it, make sure you then said, well, as I said 10 minutes ago, and well done, Jack, for picking up on this. This is a great idea. But don't do it in an aggressive way or a whiny way, just assertive with no emotion, to make sure that people realise that you had also said that.
Because that can be very frustrating in meetings sometimes, where you put forward that idea and it feels like it's ignored. But I suppose, and I suppose, again, that's not something that happens only to women, that must happen to men as well. But I think that women feel that and perhaps it's to do with the way they present that idea in the first place.
I think that we do need to reflect on that. Is there something that we're doing when we are contributing that puts other people off? Is there something makes other people switch off. So it could be to do with the actual delivery. Is our voice not being heard because it's not loud enough? Or are we frustrated so the voice gets a little bit like this? And you know, like I do, that when you're in a meeting like that and there's somebody that speaks like that, you can't help but switch off, or perhaps slightly disregard the contribution from that person with the best will in the world.
Yes, that brings to mind one particular manager that I used to work with, and I must admit, whenever she made a suggestion to the meeting, I can feel myself now kind of instantly disregarding, because it was always said in a whiny voice, and she was kind of shrunk up on her chair, and you just thought, oh, not again. Because it never felt like a positive idea. It always felt like a criticism of whatever we were talking about.
Yes. I think that's a really, really good point. And I think that as professionals, if you're in a professional environment, in a meeting where you want to make a mark, you need to dig deep and think, am I doing something like that lady, or something that might result in other people disregarding it? Oh no, it's Susan again.
Yeah. Yeah. So what can we do kind of physically to project that confidence through our voice, to make sure that our idea comes across as positive and confident?
Again, really good points. I think that it's very important to think about your posture. If you have got very closed body language, so perhaps your arms are folded, your legs are folded, and it's all quite closed, that is going to project quite a negative energy to other people in the meeting. But also it manifests itself in that your voice gets, it's not as free as it can be. It's not going to show that you are as confident. So people will pick up on that. They'll pick up on the non-verbal communication and on the tone of the voice as well as what you say. So make sure that you're, sat, open body language, sit up so that you're taking up as much space as possible, and really look at the person that you're directing the comment to, and make sure that you keep the voice low pitch rather than it going high and higher and perhaps a bit more whiny. You know what I mean? So that it remains in an assertive way rather than aggressive or whingy.
Yes, and when you said there about taking up as much space as possible, that brought to mind a couple of memories of a management meeting I used to go to on a regular basis, where some of the men were just taking up all this space, and just
they do.
And I think as women we don't do that. That doesn't feel natural for us.
No, it doesn't, and obviously we can't man-spread. And you know what I mean? But some of them have all of these gadgets and books and stuff. Maybe we need to put our handbags on the table and have various files and make our little fiefdom round our plate, but round our space to do a sort of male equivalent.
And you know, that's one really interesting point that just occurs to me, is that very often the very senior people in a meeting, they either have loads of stuff with them, loads of files, loads of books, loads of stuff, or they have absolutely nothing at all because they know that somebody else is going to be dealing with the notes or taking care of things. And so maybe that's a way that we can make our physical presence felt in the room.
I think that's a good idea, yes. Perhaps all of you ladies, all of the ladies listening here, maybe we need to have a new movement for the equivalent of man-spreading and man devices around around the table.
We could be onto something here, Susan. I was thinking of various hashtags going through my head then, and I thought, oh no, don't go there, don't go there. That is not going to work. So I know before, when we talked a couple of years ago when I interviewed you, and that was one of the highlights of the conference, And I always remember you talked about the diva feet, because I remember the Tiger Feet song running through my head. So tell us a bit, because I know you talked about how we can physically use our bodies and kind of lean in, is what I remember you saying.
Absolutely. You know, this is Sheryl Sandberg, who she's I always, is it the COO of not Google, Facebook, and she wrote a book, Lean In, and I think it's a really, really interesting book, and she tries to encourage women not to sit back in work situations, but to lean in, sort of almost the equivalent of 1 foot forward, being ready to jump in. And with meetings, of course, normally you're sitting down, and the idea of leaning into the table, if you just do that now, there is an energy, isn't there?
Well, I tend to do that all the time, certainly when I'm doing podcast interviews now, because I learned from the maestro, Susan.
Oh, thank you. The maestra.
Maestra, yes. That's your opera background coming out there.
But you know, there's something that it's an engagement, isn't it? It's almost a physical thing, that there's an energy that goes into your body by slightly leaning in, rather than sitting back and listening to what everybody is saying in a meeting. You're more present. Does that make sense?
It makes absolute sense, and I think that's often perhaps if you're not feeling too confident about being in that meeting, or perhaps it's your first time at that particular meeting, or it's a new role for you, or it's a promotion, perhaps the natural tendency is actually to sit back and wait and listen. Whereas if you kind of get in there the first time and you sit forward, and it looks like you're ready to engage, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and you can still be listening more actively by leaning in. So if you're in a new role, of course you want to listen to the conversations. You want to find out as much information as you can before you make decisions. But leaning in and being obviously actively listening is going to send a really useful message to your team.
Absolutely, yes. So we've talked about, how we can use our voice and how we can use our presence. I know some of the women that I have talked to, and I know certainly for me this has been a challenge as well, as in a large meeting room, I've got quite a fairly quiet voice. So how do I ensure that it's kind of heard without shouting?
Again, a really, really good question. And you will probably not believe that naturally I've got a very quiet voice. So I've had to work on that. But that's one of the great things of being an opera singer. You learn how to do that. I think that we talked about the posture when we're sat down, and making sure that we've got open body language, that we're relaxed round the shoulder and neck area, so that our larynx, our voice box, is free. Really think about where you are projecting the voice to. So if it's a long table or, quite a big space, really think about where you're going to throw and project the voice, if that makes sense. And don't think about, I've got to push the voice, because can you hear how my voice is on fire? Think about it, it's almost as though you're throwing the voice. So, Sherry, I'd like to add this to the agenda for next time.
Right. Oh, that sounds really different.
Or does it sound ghastly?
No, it doesn't sound ghastly, but it kind of sounds stronger.
Yeah.
Without shouting.
And I will tell you a little story. I call it Finding Your Inner Betty, after Baroness Betty Boothroyd.
Oh, the speaker.
She was the first female speaker of the House, and an absolute heroine of mine. And I wrote to her and asked if I could ask a few questions about her voice, and she agreed that I could meet her in the House of Lords.
Oh, wow.
And this is a few years ago, probably, 8 years ago now. And she naturally has a low-pitched voice anyway. She was a contralto when she sang, and we talked about a particular singer that she knew and everything. But she made a positive decision that when she was Speaker of the House, she would keep her voice low-pitched, because she knew that when you project the voice, when you try and make it louder, it can go higher-pitched. Mm. And when it goes higher-pitched, it's more difficult to cut through all of the noise of the naughty MPs. and the present Speaker of the House doesn't do that, and sometimes it's order, isn't it? Mm. If you think of who it is. But she positively went, order, like that, and it would cut through everything, and then they'd all scuttle back to their seats. And if you listen back to these old recordings of her being Speaker of the House, that's what she did. Mm. So thinking, I obviously knew how to do it, but she elaborated on it and said, I positively think of keeping the voice low-pitched and projecting the voice and throwing it to the other end of the room.
Interesting concept. And I think even if you don't know how to do that, if you think about throwing your voice, it kind of just happens.
I think so. So if you can visualise that, and certainly when I work with either individuals or teams, I have some tennis balls and get people to start throwing them so that they're able to visualise that side.
Oh, do you know what? You've just given me a brilliant idea for my Women's Confident Leadership programme. So anyway,
throw some balls in.
Yes, throwing balls. Anyway, enough of that. So, Susan, I've really enjoyed this conversation today. So just to kind of finish up, what would be your one top tip for women who want to speak up with confidence at meetings?
We talked about some of the other things like posture and keeping the voice low-pitched, but really, really prepare before a meeting. Mm-hmm. You are going to have an agenda. Find out about all of the people that are going to be there. Find out from your team, is there any things that need to be contributed? Yep. The more you prepare, the better you will come across. You'll be more confident.
Yes, and that preparation is absolutely crucial, isn't it? Because you don't want to get caught out by a surprise or find out about, particularly if you're chairing the meeting, to find out about something that's gone wrong or something that your team has done. The last place you want to find out about a mistake your team has made is in the meeting when somebody else calls you out on it. So that preparation is absolutely essential. And I know you've just launched a meeting skills course. So do you want to just tell us just very briefly a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. It's something that I've done with my husband because he works in local government. He does a lot of redevelopment programs as a consultant. And he and I have put together an online course with videos, workbooks, some podcasts on everything about meetings, from the preparation, how to conduct yourself in a meeting, taking minutes, the agenda, how to use that, how to chair a meeting. And we challenge you really to speak up and see the benefits of a meeting that can be for you, your team, your own personal profile by being a great meeting person.
I think it makes a big difference to how you're seen, and people's perception of you is how you speak up at a meeting or how you run a meeting if you're the person running the meeting. Susan, that's been absolutely fabulous. So if people want to find out more about you or your company or your meeting skills course, where can they go? What's your website?
My website is executivevoice.co.uk, and I'm on LinkedIn as well, Susan Heaton Wright, and I'm always delighted to connect with people.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Susan. You've been a fabulous guest today. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.